Hello everyone. Now, as you may have noticed, we're not able to do our usual fall Scotch tasting series this year, but it doesn't mean we've abandoned Scotch tasting. Coming up Friday, November the 12th at 6 o'clock, we've got one whopper of a Scotch tasting for you, co-hosted by Lee Hanson. Now, we're going to be doing all of the Hunter Laing whiskies, as we always do when Lee's involved, and we've got 3 from Hepburn's Choice, 1 from Old Malt Cask, 1 from First Editions, and the new Scarabus 10-year. From the Hepburn's Choice, we have a Miltonduff, so a lightly peaty but overall very soft, sweet, creamy whiskey. The peat's just the lightest accent. Then we get into a little more peat. We bring out a Talisker from the Isle of Skye, and we get right into what I think might be my favorite whiskey of the lineup, actually, the Ardmore 6-year from Hepburn's Choice. This starts with a big peaty hit, and then it just turns into being floral and creamy and pretty right in the middle. Then we change gears a little bit and we go to some older whiskeys. We have a Balmenach 14. Now, Balmenach, not a distillery we see a whole lot from, but this is a very spicy, clean, kind of vanilla whiskey. And then we get a little bit older. We have a Cask strength Glen Moray 24-year. This is somewhat like the Miltonduff here. It's a bit sweeter, it's a bit richer, but it's still just an absolutely massive whiskey at Cask strength. And then we'll round things out with the brand new Scarabus 10-year. So boiling smoke, richness, spice. You know, during the Scotch tastings we normally have not very peaty weeks. We have big peaty weeks. We can't really do it over 12 weeks. We're going to have to compress it down a little bit. So we've got some peat, some completely peatless, but overall a really top class lineup. Tasting tickets for this are $40, which covers costs. And I'm hoping to see you all out Friday, November 12th at 6 o'clock. Thank you so much for watching. Hello everyone, Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits here for our fall whiskey tasting. Just slightly modified edition, of course, with COVID. And well, I really wanted to do something a little special here. So we normally do 4 whiskeys for $40 or for $35. We're going to do 6 this time, including like a 1996 Glen Moray. So, you know, preemptively, you're welcome. Now, I'm joined tonight by Lee Hanson, who has the fanciest title I've ever heard. He is the Spirit Ambassador for Icon Collectible Spirits. If everyone at home is making a wanking motion right now, that is the correct thing to be doing. Now, Lee does represent the entire Hunter Laing portfolio here in Alberta, and we're going to be tasting 4 different ranges from him. From Old Malt Cask, we'll be tasting the Balmenach, that's sample 1 in your kit. From First Editions, as I said, we have the Glen Moray 1996. From Hepburn's Choice, we have a trio of whiskies. We have the Miltonduff 11, the Talisker 9, and the controversial Ardmore 6. We'll get to why that's controversial in a minute. And then finally, we finish with the brand new Scarabus 10-year. Now, you're probably familiar with the Scarabus. We've tasted it before, but the 10-year is brand new. Lee, how are you tonight?
I'm really good. Quick correction. I represent the Hunter Laing nationally.
Oh, pardon me. Yeah. All right.
You know, and I'm happy to be able to make that announcement because I love these guys. They're so great to work with. Andrew Laing, the kind of latest generation, and his brother Scott. They love Canada and they are excited at the idea of maybe getting over here next year. So they should be bringing some really, really good stuff. I might even have some Ardbeg Magnums coming my way.
Ooh.
That's all. Yeah. With the what now? A lot of exciting stuff lined up, and that's part of what's great about working with them is I've always got exciting new whiskeys and new opportunities to share. And great to see you. And hello to all my friends in Lethbridge.
All right, so we are going to get started here with the Balmenach 14. I'm going to talk a little bit about the whiskey and introduce it, and then I'll throw it over to you to talk about Old Malt Cask and the whiskey in more precise terms. So this is Balmenach. Now this is perhaps for some of you, I didn't say it was your turn yet, Lee. Perhaps for some of you, this is not a distillery that you're 100% familiar with. The reason for that is they don't actually have an official distillery bottling for North America. But that's not to say they don't actually have an official product. For any of you who've actually bought the Caroon Gin, this is actually, if you go to Balmenach and do the distillery tour, you won't be poured any Balmenach single malt. You'll actually be poured the Caroon Gin, which is the only official bottling for North America. So How do we get this here? Well, that's the role of independent bottlers like Hunter Laing and spirit ambassadors for the national scene like Lee Hanson. So really fun, nice to see it. We only get it through independent bottlers. Really excited to pour it. You'll be surprised maybe that one of the older whiskeys, actually the two oldest whiskeys, are right at the start. It's because they're so very, very delicate. So I think that's a suitable introduction. Lee, why don't you walk us through the Balmenach 14 and Old Malt Cask and where that fits in the Hunter Laing lineup?
Yeah, you bet. So Old Malt Cask is the oldest of the independent bottle line that we have. We've got 3 different ones on the table. This is the one that we've been working with the longest. OMC, Old Malt Cask, is always bottled at 50% alcohol, always from a single cask. The only time I've ever seen it lower than 50 was when it had reached that naturally, or if the client has decided to buy an entire barrel and prefers the Old Malt Cask packaging, you can see them in cask strength in there as well. So it's had a 25th anniversary last year, so it's 26 years old now. And this Balmenach, as Kyle already mentioned, you just don't see outside of the UK unless you get it from an independent bottler. You're from a refill hogshead. So interesting, when you go refill, typically you would have a long aging process to leach as much character out of the barrel as you need to. But Balmenach comes out of the still so meaty, especially for a Speyside whiskey, that it handles and pulls oak character out really, really quickly. So right on the nose, right off the bat, it's pure vanilla. And on the palate, I get really great kind of shortbread and butter cookies, just some nice, rich, fun, malty, sugary stuff.
I'd also say that kind of
I think
follows
it
up
holds
with...
the booze well.
It does hold the booze really well. And I apologize for anyone who's kind of sees me and Lee talking over each other. He's on a tape delay, and I've got his tape delay version, so sometimes it doesn't quite work out for us for timing. The odd thing I get with this is normally when I taste Balmenach, it's like you said, it's a very meaty whiskey, it's a very full-bodied whiskey. This for Balmenach might be the most delicate example I've had, and we're going to return to that concept again with Ardmore. It's very pretty. I get some lovely Asian pear. I get like a real mineral water or soft water characteristic off of it, which you certainly can get from Speyside, but I wouldn't call it a universal. The finish on it's really long, really spicy, very drawn out. I don't want to say this is my favorite Balmenach because I've only really had 3 or 4, and I haven't had another one in the last couple of years because, like you said, they don't really come around real often. But I think this is a heck of an opener. I was very surprised because when Mike and I were picking the order, we did the Hepburn's Miltonduff first, and we were shocked how much bigger it was than the Balmenach. The Balmenach, despite being that big bourbon hit, is actually a very delicate, very feminine whiskey to me, and I'm really excited we get to taste it first.
It's not a bad position to be in. This is an embarrassment of riches on the table, but also that time delay. And now we can really, I don't have to worry about my F-bombs anymore. I know you guys are on top of it.
No, you still do, but I actually don't care. just not as many to start. We'll ease into those.
We can get warm, yeah, for sure.
And I think Sean points out an interesting point that most of the Balmenachs we've had have usually been a sherry cask. This might be the first exclusively ex-bourbon Balmenach that we've had through. And I'm trying to think who the heck's Balmenachs we've had, because I don't think I've had a Signatory. I don't think I've had a Cooper's Choice. Might have been from one of the smaller bottlers. I can't think of the last Balmenach I actually had, but we won't dwell on that. Very unusual dram that we don't see very often, and a very, very good one. It's nice to see these ones. The other one that really stands out that it's not out of production or anything, but I almost never see is Tamnavalin. Never really turns up very often.
The last one I had was 31 years old, and I haven't seen anything in a couple of years.
All right, shall we move on?
That was a nice malt. Yeah, absolutely. I like this being earlier in the program, and it really makes me laugh. I've actually featured this in a couple of tastings already this season, and I have to warn people, okay, so I'm starting with the Glen Moray, and it is a cask strength, very old bottle of whiskey, and I implore you, these ones always get buried. the delicate ones always get buried. And hang on to it because there's going to be a lot of big, bold flavors. But this whiskey is so gorgeous and so delicate, but still having a nice, beautiful richness to it. It's holding, what is it, 55.9% alcohol.
And at this age, that's
remarkable. And it does not come across too hot to me at all.
I think I'm actually going to hold off on putting water in because I don't think this whiskey really merits it. I think it's fine without.
I think it's fine without as well. And so I just always try to warn people, like, we're going to hit a blast, but it is absolutely the right move. And everyone agrees, especially at the end after we get past our little smoky round here. So when the brothers are working with their barrels, they actually target, if they find a refill barrel that is in great condition, but it is very much a refill barrel, let's say it's going to be on its last year, but it's extremely solid, it's holding, it's not leaking, it's got really, really great craftsmanship. They want to find a place, a distillery that's going to have a spirit that's going to age really well, because it's going to have to. We're in this refill barrel that's kind of on the end of its cycle. So they pick their shot. They go to the places they know that are going to produce the spirit and have the environment that's going to do the barrel justice. So in this case, the Glen Moray, they went there because they knew that the wonderful rich barley sugar notes that are inherent in Glen Moray whiskey are going to really stretch out and create these beautiful long flavor chains and kind of make up for a little less oak and really showcase the quality of the spirit as it's concentrated. That's just a fantastic example of it.
For me, I'm getting a ton of floral on this. Orange blossom, cherry blossom, lots of fruit, lots of floral, and then that big sweet barley sugar right through the middle that really just carries off all the pretty things and keeps it from being maybe a little too showy. It keeps the highlights as highlights rather than just dominating the spirit. Yeah, more like
nice.
This.
Yeah, and absolutely. It does. It lifts it and carries it. It's so good.
Now this is
24 years.
Yep.
That's just something to be able to pull off a one of those non-round numbers, a classic indie bottler thing to do.
And not a bad price. Like, we're doing these guys at $225, and getting a 25 under $300 these days is getting bloody rare. So.
It really is. Another note about distillery offerings. In Alberta, you cannot actually get distillery offerings at fine stores like Andrew Hilton. They are locked up by the Alcanna Group. So there are the occasional distillery bottoms, but you have to darken the door of a Wine and Beyond to get one. So nobody wants to do that. We'd much rather get these independents.
But I like even more overpriced Liquor Depot. Sorry, it's only whiskey too. Where did that come from? Now, like you said, the distillery bottlings are locked up by a chain. I want to talk a little bit about, like, for those, I assume, because most people here are Andrew Hilton customers, they've been being pitched independent bottlings by me for the last 21 years. They're very familiar with independent bottlings, but do you want to, for maybe people who are joining us for the very first time, talk a little bit about the difference between an independent and a distillery bottler?
Oh, absolutely. So it all comes down to your product, obviously, but a distiller has the task of producing something and reproducing something. And pulling that together and having a consistent brand requires some, I don't want to say compromises, but if you're making a lot of one type of whiskey and you're expected to maintain a certain flavor profile, there's best practices. And those include homogenizing your individual barrels by by mixing them together, and then passing them through a chill filter. That chill filter will remove some of the heart of the whiskey, some of the oil, and that's going to take out some of the negative characteristics of some barrels that aren't so great. Then they'll add spring water, color mostly, spring water to get it to 40%, and it tastes exactly like the last one. Working on a smaller scale, touching every barrel, and celebrating each uniqueness, each individual cask, we don't need to homogenize, so you're always going to get the full character that was in that whiskey. It's a more natural product. And again, not because we're better, because the other idea is a bad idea. It's just we're celebrating the uniqueness of one cask.
That's a much more politic
so
answer
we don't
than
show
I
it,
usually
we
go
don't
with.
add caramel. The different lines that we do have are bottled to the strengths that we feel best represent the whiskey, but also at a point where if you add water, you will see a little tiny touch of haze to activate that oil. And I think that a good rule of thumb going forward for anybody is if you're not sure if something's been chill filtered, the alcohol level being at 43 and up will be a better indication that it still has those natural oils in there.
Now, before we vilify, distillery bottlings too much, there has been a real trend towards no caramel addition, no chill filtration, even for distillery bottlings. Probably the first one that started doing that would be Bruichladdich, of course, but I'd say that of my distillery bottlings, I'd say almost half now are non-chill filtration, non-caramel addition, which is really nice to see, and that was something entirely spearheaded by the independents.
Yeah, absolutely. The quality of the product that was coming out was embarrassing them. There are a few that have definitely taken on the no chill filtration. Glencadam has always done that, so that's nice to have those in our stable. There was the Nadura. Do you remember Glenlivet? Take a stab at it, and that was a really good whiskey.
It was. That was the 16 cask
and so
strength, right?
people noticed. Yeah, the Nadura. The first one I had was duty free only. Oh. And it was a 14-year-old at 46.
Okay. It's been a little while, so I might be forgetting, but yeah. we see some whiskeys.
Yeah.
Oh, before we get to the Miltonduff, we have a question from the crowd. Would you comment on distilleries that don't release barrels to independent bottlers at all? I mean, famously Lagavulin and some others.
Absolutely. They there are still ways to get those barrels, and we'll get them. No, it's going to come up later. But I don't feel. Let me put it this way: they all sell to private guys. If they don't want to sell to independent bottlers, that's fine. Independent bottlers can still buy from those privates, and we do. So they're not bad people. They want to have control of their brand, and they should. So it's absolutely their decision, and I still love their whiskeys. I buy very, very, very few bottles of whiskey. I buy hundreds and hundreds of bottles. I buy very, very few bottles of whiskey with my money, and the last one I bought was a bottle of Lagavulin.
That's fair.
So,
and Lagavulin 16 has been a rare
bird
bird this last 6 months, so that has been a tough one to find.
And it's a great bottle of whiskey, so there's lots of love out there for those guys.
Yep. So we're going to move along here. We'll talk about Hepburn's Choice. Now, this is a brand that's got a little bit of a story, and it's been a bit of a journey. I remember when they first showed up, I was really excited, brought them all in, and they did not drink worth a damn. They've really come on. They really changed their stripes. No, I'm talking about like the very first time we brought in Hepburn's Choice, when it was still in the really plain Jane Grey tubes, like even before this packaging, which was kind of the middle road packaging, like when it was just the plain gray with the plain white. We had a Speyburn 9 that we had for the better part of like 6 years because I just couldn't shift it. I think I donated it to like a silent auction or something just to get the hell rid of it. If you bought it in a silent auction, I'm very sorry. But yeah, I mean, Hepburn's Choice now, they've repackaged, they've repositioned themselves. The whiskeys are shockingly better. Tell us a little bit about Hepburn's Choice, because in a sense it's the newest of the ranges. I think first editions came out after the first release, but it's been relaunched now. I think it's kind of the newest in the stable. Tell us a little bit about Hepburn's Choice.
Yeah, I'll go back to the beginning with you there, Kyle, too. I tried those whiskeys, and I, at the time, was just representing first edition. I didn't have Old Malt Cask yet, and I said, well, good luck with these, and just decided to concentrate on their cask strength offering. I agree that the whiskeys were a little disappointing, and this is a reflection of just as the second generation was kind of waning, not in their interest, but maybe in their ability to touch every single project, the newest generation, Scott and Andrew, came on and recognized, okay, there's a problem here. And when they had asked and I politely declined, the look on their faces was not one of anger, but one of understanding. And they said, well, let's come back to that in a year or so. And that's exactly what we did. And it turns out they had reinvigorated their barrel program. They had decided on that interim packaging that Kyle just showed you. And the latest step was, we've got a good thing here. We've re-racked some barrels, we've moved some stuff around, and we've made some great strides in progress in the quality of the whiskey. Now the package has to meet it again. So this is the first run on this. We got one, maybe two bottlings of it late last year, but now we're going to see lots more color on the shelves, a better bottle, and the Hepburn's brand is where, I don't want to say it's more risk-taking, it's more avant-garde. They're going to push the envelope. We're going to have younger ages. We'll do the occasional double barrel, and we'll see some more wine cask stuff floating around here too. So it's made for some really dynamic whiskey. It had to be this way to kind of push the bad memories of the product before it was lauded by myself and Kyle, of course.
I will say that does kind of remind me a little bit of, say, Signatory's entry-level series, which has always been famously the weakest of the range. I don't think I've bought a Signatory bottom range in 10 plus years. And for a while there, much to your chagrin because you were repping them at the time, but they were not a big seller for us. What you just said, though, actually reminded me a little bit of another independent bottler. Cooper's Choice has been really kind of diving into that younger whiskeys, lots of more dynamic barrels. And as we see rising whiskey prices across the board, using more novel barrel expressions and no age statement whiskeys or younger whiskeys is really the only way you can get interesting things that aren't just bloody Macallan 12 or something absolutely dreadful like that into people's hands. That's brilliant whiskey. It's almost impossible now to do a life-changing 12 under $100. I don't think that's possible anymore.
You're absolutely right. It is impossible. There's value in the brand too, and that's just where, like, prices don't go down, and the kind of pricing nature of whiskey, where a lot of it is tied up in the taxes on the actual alcohol. It doesn't mean that a 6-year-old should be half the price of a 12-year-old.
No.
Or it doesn't compute that way, and unfortunately, because we're human beings, we're gonna see it that way, right? And there's been a lot of young whiskeys passing people's lips for a long time. They just didn't know because we have funny names that we put on them, like Macallan, their stripper series, and a few others. That those were some younger whiskeys that they tasted fine. I won't knock any of them, and I've had some young whiskeys that are maybe a little firm, maybe a little too young, but I've had some absolutely incredible ones. So it's just important to try them all.
I think that's fair. Miltonduff. Now, this is a whiskey that I usually assume with being fudgy, caramelly, dense, gingerbready. And this isn't even out of a sherry barrel. We actually had to double check. This is out of a bourbon cask, or probably 2 bourbon casks. And it's still that wonderful Christmas cake, rich toffee, Tootsie Roll characteristic that we all kind of know and love from Miltonduff. Famously, Miltonduff is actually Mark's favorite distillery who works here. He really loves Miltonduff, and rightfully so. For those who are picking up olives, there's definitely something kind of savory, oily here. I almost get it as more like a Worcestershire sauce characteristics. Shut up, Aaron. You know what? You can laugh when you fix Lee's video, okay? Then you can laugh.
It's out of my hands, man. Nothing to do with that.
Worcestershire. Thank you, Mark. But yeah, it is a little on the simple side, but it's also really delicious. Like, it's bright, and it's fresh, and it's fudgy. You know what? Should an 11-year be as complex as a 24-year? No, but it's less than half the price, too. So, do bear that in mind. Lee, tell us a little bit about the Miltonduff here.
So Miltonduff, it's not hard to see, and you've got your props lined up. It's just too easy. It's not hard to see why it's the backbone of the Valentine's blend. There's some fun history too. There's an old Canadian bit of ownership in this as well, going back a while ago. I've always found it to be just a nice chewy. I've only had it from Independence, but I've always found it to be very fudgy, like you said. And this one is just a really almost dangerously easy to drink, and the price is reflective of the enjoyment you'll have every week when you pick up a new bottle.
Yes, Steve,
It's a daily driver.
I do know the correct pronunciation. I just kind of fudged it on camera. And you know what, Steve? I actually really disagree on the new make thing. I'm usually super sensitive to that smell of new make, which is, to me, always hot copper, hot creamed corn. I don't get it here. And when I was talking about the first release of Hepburn's Choice and why I didn't like it, specifically that Speyburn, it was all I got. That Speyburn 9 was nothing but new make. So I'm actually going to split with Steve on this one and say I don't get it. Anything else here? Oh, we actually had a question for Lee here. John asked, do you have any thoughts, and I'll bet you have thoughts, on the pressure maturation of whiskeys with flavored wood bricks?
I think it's a dirty pool. I'm all for innovation, absolutely. And if somebody is doing it right, I'll try to keep an open mind. If it's masquerading as provenance, then I have an issue. If you celebrate an innovation and tell people you're doing new things with wood science, and the Scotch Whisky Association is saying it's okay to do, then I'll give it its day in court. It's not something that's entirely new. Cognac has been doing something very similar in their process and nobody would ever admit to doing it, but they've been doing something very similar in their process for 100 years. So, and I like me some cognac. So we'll have to keep an open mind. But first, my instinct says, you're talking to a guy that celebrates the single cask. So it'd be hard to sign on wholeheartedly, but I will give it its day in court. And if it works, and if it's commensurate with the price tag and not manufactured provenance, I'm all for it.
Well, let me pitch it to you this way. Loch Lomond, yes or no?
And he's frozen.
And he's frozen. We lost Lee. Did you hear me? Or is my audio screwed?
I did. Loch Lomond, yes or no?
Yep, Loch Lomond, yes or no?
Independent bottlings of Loch Lomond have been fantastic.
That's a wonderfully political way to put it. Thank you. And yes, I did put the Ballantines on the counter. Thank you for reminding me. The reason the Ballantines is here is just like Glenburgie. It is a blend of the sweet creaminess of Miltonduff and the spicy green plant herbal complexity of Glenburgie that kind of gives Ballantines its nature. So if you go to Miltonduff, they have a big Ballantine sign on the side of the distillery. And when we can actually get the distillery bottling of Glenburgie, which we can't at the minute, it's the Glenburgie by Ballantines, or Ballantines Glenburgie. So they're really shoving that blended whiskey down our throat, which I don't particularly appreciate, but I do like both Miltonduff and particularly Glenburgie. All right, shall we move on to a absolutely cracking Talisker? I have not been blown away with Talisker in a very long time. I thought the Port Ree was a little too sweet. I've never liked Storm. I think the Classic 10 is fine. That Game of Thrones one was the most horrifying thing I've ever tasted in my life. Second only to the Game of Thrones Lagavulin, which actually managed to be worse than Game of Thrones Talisker. And that's not a slight on the Game of Thrones series in general. I actually liked the House Stark Dalwhinnie. I thought the House Tyrell Clynelish was actually a fantastic expression. But the story on those is they wanted people to buy the whole set. And specifically, not necessarily Scotch connoisseurs. They wanted the general buying public to buy the whole set. And as a result, for the more peaty expressions, the Lagavulin and the Talisker, to make it more palatable to the general buying consumer, they sweetened the ever-loving shit out of them, and they became absolutely abhorrent disasters. So they haven't done this with this Talisker, because it's not made by Diageo, for one. But I really, really like this. So let's dig into this Talisker.
We don't get many Taliskers. Talisker happens to be one of those distilleries that doesn't give up to very many independent bottlers.
No,
And,
I think the last indie I saw from Talisker, other than the old malt casks that I still have one or two of, was actually a Murray McDavid, like a trillion years ago. So they do not come around very often.
A long time ago. Yeah, and this one took a circuitous route, and we were able to pick up this sherry cask. It's just an absolute no-brainer to pick up a sherry butt from a private collector that had bought it as an investment, and I'm certain we helped him realize some return on that investment, and now we're sharing it with you guys. And it's quite fun to see when we talk about bottling runs. Typically we're looking at 300 bottles, very, very slight amounts, because we've got older whiskeys. Here we've got this beautiful sherry butt, which is larger barrel, 500 liters, and it was already quite high. There's 903 made the run.
That's fantastic.
And I wish I had all of those. I do not. It is very, very, very tight. I got as much of it as I could. I will give you as much of it as I can, but it has been a joy in my life since it's come through the door. I think this whiskey is just an absolute delicious dram. I can convert people to drinking smoky whiskeys with this whiskey.
I think that's perfectly fair. It's so pretty. And it's funny, I think the prettiest thing on the table is actually the Ardmore, but this is one of those very few Taliskers. And I actually was talking to a customer who came in and wanted to try a couple things while we were setting up, and I poured him a tiny scrap of the Talisker. And he actually pointed out, this has so much like pretty ash. Why haven't I had Talisker like this before? And it's because the Diageo Taliskers are maybe made in more of a Ardbeggy sort of emphasize the peat, perhaps de-emphasize how pretty the core spirit of Talisker is. They did make that really odd low peat Talisker a few years ago, which I actually didn't like, but this version I think is actually my favorite Talisker in recent years.
I like the youth. I mean, we've had some really nice younger Bulmores in sherry. When a smoky whiskey is in its youth and it hasn't had time to really kind of concentrate it comes out extremely palatable. It is not like licking an ashtray, as some of the people that aren't enlightened yet would say. It is just so subtle, and I think with still enough character of alcohol and the sweetness of sherry, just make it really roll around on the palate. Wonderful stuff.
I have a feeling that if we were doing this live, if you were standing here and it was a Friday night pre-COVID or post-COVID, we'd be out of this already. Like it's half past 6. We'd be out of this already. We'd have a waiting list. We'd be booking stuff in for next week.
Yeah, it is stunning. And it's quite funny too, because this round, you know how it is with me. I get X number of and it's not too often that we end up with a lineup that's carrying 3 smoke whiskeys. But we've just had such an embarrassment of really good and not punch you in the face smoky whiskeys come along that this is the second time this week that I've sat in on a tasting with 3 smoky whiskeys in it. Just I'm blessed by having the subtle stuff that we can convert people to.
It's funny. So for those of you who aren't aware with how we kind of lay things out, one giant change to the store right behind me here, we actually moved our international single malts into the single malt room. Maybe 10 years later than we probably ought to have, but we did. So we actually have Japan, Ireland. We're going to be carrying a whole bunch of Kavalan coming in the next couple of weeks. Also, speaking of Kavalan, December 10th, we'll be back here tasting 6 Kavalans, so that'll be a lot of fun. But yeah, the rest of the store is kind of here, but just the peaty stuff kind of lies off to my left, your right, and that is the hardest section in the store to keep filled. Islay whiskeys, and even just peaty whiskeys from outside Islay, like Ardmore or Editor's Balmenach series, they sell out faster than I can buy them. Right now, it's actually looking pretty full, largely because even though I can't get Ardbeg, Ugadal, anything from Bunnahabhain more interesting than the 12, nothing new from Kilchoman, the Lagavulin 16 I can't get, nothing from Port Charlotte except the 2012, it's all filled in with cool independents like the Ardmore. It'll be joined by the Talisker in time. Cooper's Choice is a new Kalila, Scarabus and Scarabus 10. It's all the indies that are filling out my PD whiskey section and making it not look like a complete ghost town. So, rant over. Let's, Lee, do you want to tell us a little bit about the Ardmore? Let's move into that. I think Lee lost my audio. Did everyone lose my audio?
No. Should be good.
Okay, hopefully Lee can hear me. He's not looking like he can hear me.
It doesn't look like it, does it? Nothing's changed. So,
Perhaps Lee will join us in a minute. Lee, we miss you. Perhaps we will see you again soon. Did you remember to, did you mute me?
Sure can. Well, I just went through some crazy technical times watching.
Okay, there we go. We've been dealing with some juddering on your video and audio all night, so we're getting through.
yeah, we're good.
Can you hear me? He may still have me muted. Fun.
Keep ripping. It'll kick in.
Hopefully it kicks in. Okay. Ardmore 6. There's a funny story about this one, which I would like Lee to tell us. Hopefully he'll be able to hear me soon. Now this Ardmore, this is a Highland whiskey that's peated more like an Isla. To you, talk about the Ardmore.
Can you hear me now? Good. Okay, I've got a bit of a delay, but we're going to work through it. So Ardmore, wonderful history here. You know, once upon a time, all Scotch whiskies were peated, and then that went away with the advent of electricity. But Ardmore is a distillery that was created in the Highlands to be a peated whiskey to add to the Teacher's Blend that Kyle's got put up there for you. I have long liked the Ardmore whiskey, and they actually have had some younger age statement distillery offerings too, so they know how good their spirit is when it's younger and bolder, which is really refreshing. I can't say enough good stuff about them. This particular one is really a perfect match for the Hepburn's Choice line. A little more adventurous. We got a 6-year-old whiskey, certainly young by most standards, and then we're doing a double wine barrel. Bottled at 46. And again, we've talked and led up to the smoke. Of course, smoke is a component of this, but given that it's a Highland whiskey and the richness that's inherent with that style of spirit, I feel it holds on to the smoke really, really well. It doesn't become the predominant characteristic of the whiskey, in my opinion. It becomes one of the characteristics of the whiskey. It holds that really, really well.
Can you hear me now?
I love the nose too. I can hear you.
Okay, good. Because we actually grabbed like a whiteboard and a pen if you couldn't. Because I think you lost my audio. The crowd didn't, but you lost my audio for about 5 minutes there.
The technical time that I had on my end is I watched you struggle with the.
Oh no.
For like a good 2 minutes, and then I caught the rest of it and fast forward. Like I watched you talked about your Isla section, you brought up this. It's like I listened to you, you sounded like Alvin.
Okay, perfect. So you covered Ardmore really well. Let's talk a little bit about this 6 and the reason I got a phone call from the AJLC about this 6, which has never happened before, unless it was like glass in the bottle.
Nice. They actually phoned you first. Well, there was a squeaky wheel behind that phone call, so that's part of the story. When you're juggling a whole bunch of barrels like this, sometimes you don't want to pass something up because you already happen to have another Ardmore on the market. So when another great one comes along, you say, yeah, I can handle 2. So I had a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old in the market at the same time. I thought I had more of the 10-year-old. So did Liquor Connect. And it turns out there was a mistake made in the labeling process. And the irony is they're in 2 different boxes. One of them's in the old gray tubes, and this is in the short one. So from the outside, you could look and go, those are not the same whiskey. But the label on the box told you otherwise. So it all ended up being mostly Ardmore 6-year-old when I thought it was mostly Ardmore 10-year-old. And so sadly, and not surprisingly, I'm sold out of the 10-year-old because I leaned into it because I thought I had 30 cases to sell. So now, which is a lot for an independent bottle. And now I'm really, really happy to get behind this adventurous double casking of Hepburn's Choice 6-year-old.
This was actually when we first did these. This was my runaway favorite. There's a reason it's last, as I thought it showed so well. It's so subtle. It's so delicate. I get lavender. I get honeysuckle. I get fresh feel like wildflowers. The smoke is there. The peat is there, but it's just kind of taking a back seat to everything else. That was kind of the case with the Talisker, but this was a really good example of that. This might be one of the best examples of that I've ever had. I'm having to go back to like some really old indies and one-offs from Bunnahabhain before I'm getting to this level of delicacy with peat again. And then we're gonna just throw that away because the Scarabus is just a big chunky lad. But this is a very, very pretty expression of Ardmore.
It is shockingly expressive. I love the language that you used. I'll lean into it. Just some great Highland heather and coarse, and just just a beautiful mouthfeel, and that waft of smoke. When I talk about Ardmore, and I'm trying to explain to the uninitiated, or maybe sadly the ones that have only had Islay smoke and were introduced to the wrong one at the wrong time, I often say Islay smoked whiskeys are like smoked salmon, and Highland smoked whiskeys are like smoked brisket. Both are great. One of them's very obvious, and the other one takes time to chew on and have some experience with, and that's what I'm getting from this Ardmore. There is a nice base with the smoke, as opposed to iodine and seaweed, which are acquired tastes.
Yes, whereas I think almost anyone would be able to enjoy this. And yeah, this really does kind of come on the heels of another really cracking Ardmore from Hunter Lang, from Lee, which was the anniversary Ardmore 22, which I think anyone who came into the store, even if they said they hated peated whiskey, Mike Malloy recommended the Ardmore 22 because he just fell in love with it so hard. And we bought, honestly, too much. I think you were sitting at my kitchen island, like, how much of this Ardmore do you want? I'm like, I don't know, Lee, a Highland peated whiskey at a 22 that I'm gonna have to sell for like, and I was like, I'll take 8. And we just took like so much, and we had it for so long, but we got through it all, and I couldn't be happier with that. But this one, I can't say I like it better. I sure like the price point a lot better. I can certainly sell more of it coming into Christmas, but what a crackin' whiskey. Steve does have a question. Double wine cask. Do you know what wines?
I do. Oh, I know it was Bordeaux. They've got a great relationship with a guy in Bordeaux, so he pulls barrels from a number of different chateaus. And while we're on the topic, because it's Bordeaux, I think part of that that wonderful floral characteristic is a result of aging in French oak. That's something we don't usually touch on. When we think about the wine cask, we're always about what was in that barrel before, but the actual composition of French oak will give you those floral characteristics we were talking about too. So that's a nice question, timely to bring that up.
Do you know like which type of Bordeaux? Like would it be Bordeaux red, Bordeaux white, Cremant de Bordeaux?
This was what? This was red.
Okay.
It is definitely red. Yeah.
I gotta say, for a relaunch of Hepburn's Choice and the new packaging and everything, what a way to come back to market with it. These are really impressive.
Nobody believes the guy selling the stuff, but I felt exactly the same when I saw them. I was excited about that, and because I had had such a frank discussion with the boys before when I turned them down, they front loaded with we heard you, and this is our answer.
Well, when I first heard about this, I think it was about a year ago today. It was a frosty afternoon in either late fall or early spring, and it was you, me, and Christy sitting on your back deck, and we were tasting whiskey socially distanced. And it was like 3 degrees above zero. And you told me, oh, well, Hepburn's Choice is relaunching. They really, they heard you, Kyle. They're going to redo this. I'm like, surely, sure. I believe you. Let's talk about the real whiskey now. I got to say, I was wrong. I mean, I'm never wrong, but I was wrong.
You're recording this, right, Aaron?
Yeah.
No, it is really refreshing to see. Like I said, it was a function of changing of the guard, and the lowest end had not been receiving the due, and they decided to change that.
Yeah, and I will say I think those Ardmore 22s we had were selling for just a shade above 200. These are selling for 95. So, yeah, if for those of you in the comments who are really on board with liking this more than the Ardmore 22, it's a heck of a price, and we will definitely be bringing in more. I think you can pretty safely put me down for 4 more cases of this if you've got it.
Absolutely.
Cool. Before we get to the Scarabus, I do want to talk a little bit about a whiskey tasting that we kind of touched on briefly. December 10th will be our next whiskey event. We are going to do a wine tasting on November 26th. I'm not going to talk about it yet because I haven't 100% firmed up what it's going to be, but that will, as usual, be $80 to $85. Whiskey tasting coming up December 10th. It was kind of a weird afternoon. Like, we'd actually booked an appointment with Andrew from Vino al Vino, and about 5 minutes before Andrew walked in, we actually got... sorry. Okay. Something weird going on. We actually had the guy from Kavalan come in, and the guy from Kavalan just brought in 25 whiskeys to just sample with us to show us what was actually going on. And I've got to say, I was pretty blown away. I initially carried Kavalan when it launched. It didn't sell. I completely ignored it for about 12 years. Now we're actually going to do a Kavalan tasting on December 10th. So we're going to taste everything from the entry level into the podium, into 3 whiskeys from the Solist range. You can see the gap where 2 of them haven't arrived yet because they were already sold out when I ordered them, but we got an allocation in the end. That's coming up December 10th. Beer tasting next week is going to be a little bit of ESB, a little bit of kind of sweeter stouts. We have a vanilla latte stout and a sweet potato porter. That's what's coming up. But let's dive into the Scarabus 10 here.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to finally get this on hand. So we launched this in September, and Scarabus is owned by Hunter Laing. The non-age statement was much revered and still is. It's a great price tag and a proper Isle of malt. And they did a really interesting process with that. Where to homogenize the product that started as an 800 barrel parcel of a number of different age statements of a single malt. And what they did is they re-racked all of those barrels into fresh char virgin American bourbon barrels. And that gave them kind of the homogenization and the flavor cohesiveness they needed, and also added a great amount of color, natural color, and a little bit of caramelized sugar sweetness. Now we're talking about the 10-year-old here. When you pour these side by side, this is a much lighter color. And what this is a function of is it's much smaller production. This is literally touching several hand on the barrel, tasting individual 10-year-old single malt Islay whiskeys and deciding and composing a flavor profile that represents what we want 10-year-old Scarabus to be, and what we'll continue to make in the future. So we're kind of taking our skills as independent bottlers and applying those into making a single malt blend that will be consistent. And it's just it's a little bit lighter. It's definitely less sweeter, but I think there's a wonderful DNA that carries through.
Are you allowed to say the name of the distillery here or no?
This.
No, it's good.
What's that? Well, I got in trouble last time, but I'm always getting in trouble, so we could call it Kalila if you want to.
Okay. And I think the price tag tells you it's Kalila, because the price tag says it can't be anything else.
We're good at the maths.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Because you can't get Lagavulin. Lafroig is getting tougher. Kilchoman really doesn't sell. Bowmore, this isn't Bowmore, and Bowmore would be more money. Ardbeg would be ludicrously more money. It isn't a Brook Laddie or Port Ellen, or pardon me, a Port Charlotte. It's definitely not a Port Ellen at this price. Yeah, it kind of has to be Kalila just at this price point. Nothing else fits.
Nothing else fits, and nobody can part with whiskey like Kalila. Kalila makes 7 million liters, maybe even 8.5 now. They've got stuff to sell.
Question for you from Steve. Apparently he got a notification from Ardmore that they're starting to release some whiskeys now into the global market. Is that a thing that's something you can talk about yet?
There was a little leak on the internet, and it wasn't like, hey, we're selling all this stuff right now, but it's like, this is now officially whiskey. This has been in barrel long enough. We're tasting it. We like it. We have more options than we thought we had. And stay tuned. Watch this space.
All right.
So we'll see. It'll be very, very limited. What the brothers have told me from day one is that they want to take their time. They've already got a business that makes money. They're in no hurry. So if they are releasing this is like, they won't, but if they do, it's only because it is absolutely exceptional, and I will straight up murder to get some of it for you. Maybe some for me, but definitely some for you.
Fair enough. And I'm still very patiently waiting on that barrel. It's gonna happen one day.
Oh, I think it's your barrel.
It better not be my barrel. Actually, no. You know what? They are free to pour my barrel because the compensation for having accidentally poured my barrel will be worth much more.
We had a contract. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So yes, back to the Scarabus 10. We've got a more delicate structure, I think. I think the smoke is much more integrated. With the non-age statement, I get a very ashy texture, which also could be from the fresh tar on the barrels, of course. But I think that this is another great price tag, especially for an age statement Isla whiskey.
I really like this. This is so much more interesting than the classic Scarabus. I'm agreeing with the people in the comments who think it's better than the classic 12, but I'm very famously on record as saying I loathe the Kalila 12 distillery release. That's why you'll never ever see it on my shelves. I think this is pretty as hell. I think it's absolutely delicate, pretty, light. Oddly enough, I think at a much lower price point, it gives the Talisker a little tiny bit of a run for its money. I think most people who would like this Talisker would also like this Scarabus 10. I think the Talisker is better, but is it... What the hell, what are we charging for that? We're charging this $80. Is that twice as many dollars good as the Scarabus?
Well, it's a lot easier to get, both financially and physically. So that could be reflected in the price tag as well. Like I said, we're third party on that Talisker, and still think it's just an absolute cracker at that price tag. But you're right, it is hard to, 2 bottles of Scarabus 10
or one bottle of Talisker.
Something I have to guard prison style anytime I want to drink it because I'm never sharing it with anybody.
Yep. I still, you know what I'll say though, I'm still going back to the Talisker after this.
Yeah, that's I don't have a lot of the Talisker around because it
well, you're about to have a lot
will be a
less.
habit. We've got a real rodent problem here.
I see
and
that.
Mice are just raising. Kisses? No. Okay, eat it.
Eat it.
All right, so
Second.
Lee, if you had to pick a favorite tonight, what are you picking out of the lineup as your pick of the night?
Talisker.
Talisker?
I'm unashamedly in love with that whiskey.
I
should say the Ardmore. I think it's great.
I'm actually going to go that direction. I'm going to have the Ardmore
3
1.
bottles, but the Talisker's mine.
I think I'm actually going to go the Ardmore 1, the Balmenach 2. These two are really close, but I'm probably going to give the nod to the Talisker ahead of the Glen Moray. And then these two, they're a fair bit below the Talisker and the Glen Moray, but probably the Miltonduff by a nose, just because of that super saline olive thing ahead of the Scarabus 10. but that's no slight in coming in 6th here. Like that's a heck of a lineup. Anything you think I got wildly wrong there?
That's an embarrassment of riches.
It is. It was a fun Friday night.
No, not at all. I'm glad you actually came back to that Glen Moray, because even given what I said, even though I warned everybody, I still just was completely enamored with that Talisker and forgot all about it. And I want to bring up something I forgot before. I've been told the proper pronunciation is Glen Moray. And I've also been told that if you ask a Scotsman to name an eel, they'll say Moray. But if you ask them to read what's on that label, they'll say Murray. So I don't know what it is. I vacillate between both, but I thought that was a fun little factoid. And that is my second favorite, for sure.
Really? That's fascinating.
The Glen Moray, I love that whiskey. I think that how can you be graceful at 55.9? Turns out it can.
Yeah.
I'm just impressed.
I think I am the only dissenter with the Talisker being number 1. Nicole's got Talisker hands down. Sean has it number 1. Craig has it number 1. Steve has it number 1. I still like the Ardmore, but fine. I'll just stay here with my Ardmore and you can all drink the Talisker. I say as I'm drinking the Talisker because that was the thing I poured myself after the tasting.
You couldn't help it.
Oh, and Kevin's parents vote for 1 and 2 evenly. And Elizabeth and he are sold on the Ardmore. So, you know what? I'm okay with all of those options because it really is an embarrassment of riches. Yeah, thank you, Lee. It's funny. The irony is that now that your video quality is finally cleaned up and everything's good, we're just kind of wrapping up, which is a terrible tragedy.
Well, it's funny because on my end, it was your video quality.
Well, yeah, that's the way things work with...
You were slow installed, right? Of course it would be that way.
Classic.
So, what else are we going to see from you before Christmas? Because for those of you at home who can't tell, actually, Sky, could you give us the big pan up here? Above the light's probably going to ruin everything. But up here, for those who don't know, this is our new arrival section. When you're probably getting a whole bunch of Michael Bay-esque lens flare. This is normally where we put our new arrivals.
J.J. Abrams.
And it's looking pretty empty up there because I went and moved everything back into here. So we got room for about a dozen new whiskeys. So Lee, what's going to show up between now and Christmas that we're going to have on our shelves for sure between now and Christmas?
Okay, so funny story. I've got a 25-year-old Blair Athol from Old Malt Cask sherry, like a Duncan Hines cake, moist and delicious. It's so good. In the Blair Athol theme, I've also got a 23-year-old from First Edition that is it's powerful. It'll blow your hair back. It's definitely showing its alcohol, but it's got such a wonderful grippy sherry palate once you add enough water. I've got a couple more Hepburn's Choices coming along that should be landing any minute now.
What do you have?
should be. I've got exactly. I have an Othrusk and another Kalila that's coming down the pike.
Would someone, for the love of God, do an independent Kleinlish? I know Diageo's cracking down on it a little bit these days, but somebody has to have something from 10 years ago before they started cracking down.
Isn't it funny? I just bought a friend a gift that's fairly into the single casks, and I found an older Kleinlish that I ended up grabbing an older Old and Rare before it was my brand. And I picked up a bottle of that just for that reason. You're just not seeing as much of them. I wish I could tell you different, but we're seeing the results of them cracking down on it 10 years ago.
Yeah. Do you have any casks of Kleinlish in your
just sort of
barrel program?
And shipped that's been available. I haven't seen one offered in quite some time.
Oh, well, fine. You just lost a sale.
Sorry, what's that?
I said, do you have any barrels that you can even get right now of Kleinlish?
Nope.
No,
none.
Well, you just lost a sale.
It never comes up. I've got a Dalmore right now.
Well, that's great. So do a lot of other people.
And an Old Pulteney.
You know, it's funny. Old Pulteney sold really, really well till they changed the packaging. I don't know why. I think the packaging is actually nicer now, but now nobody buys it. People were really attached to that stupid-looking semi-oval box with a boat on it, apparently.
They're looking for the old Pulteney.
Yes. Older Pulteney. So a couple of questions coming in. Nicole's dad, Brad, asked a question. Who's the artist on your background painting?
Oh, that. Thank you. That is a local. That is a Calgary local artist. I ended up getting this at Chintz and Company.
Okay.
So it doesn't. I will ask you, since we're looking at it, do you see cows or horses?
Cows.
And what is so-and-so's dad? I can't remember the lady's name.
Well, we have tape delay, so we'll find out in about 15 seconds.
Okay. Well, it's 50-50 down the road. I see horses, but like I say, half the people agree with me.
And Brad says horses, so it is indeed 50-50. Although I would say the one kind of just over your shoulder in my bottom right, probably your bottom, other right, that looks like a moose more than anything else. But Devin also says cows. Kevin, you don't have to ration the Clynelish Game of Thrones. It tends to go on super sale, like not that infrequently. I'm not really saying we're going to have it on like big sale for Christmas, but that might end up being our Christmas single malt sale whiskey if it goes on sale again between now and Christmas. Because when it goes on sale, it doesn't go on sale for like $1 or $2 off. It goes on for like $8, $10, $12 off. And if it goes on for that, we're going to have like 10, 15 6-packs of that for blowout prices. Because A, I love Clynelish, and B, I do love a bargain. So that, fingers crossed is going to be happening. More questions. Sean, I do hope you come in and buy all 4, purely an entirely selfish basis. Oh, what's the story on Signatory? I place an order, I get about a quarter of it. We have a couple of signatories. We have a Mortlach and a Glen Spey, and actually, an absolutely cracking, heavily peated Bunnahabhain right now in the Silverton series. And we have exactly 1 bottle left of a Black Tin Mortlach. Yeah, it's the question that, we place an order. I think we may have firmly lost Lee. We place an order, we get a quarter to a third of it at most, which is unfortunate. We are now getting many questions about the cows and the horses, which is wonderful. Kevin, which one do you want 2 saved of? Oh, no, we have officially lost Lee. Skype has closed. We'll see if we can get him back. If only just to say goodnight, because it is getting on 7 now, and
yeah,
we should probably say goodnight at some point here.
Please go on. I'll give him a call.
We'll give Lee a call, see what happens. Making really high event video here while we listen while that rolls, yeah.
No, it's toast.
Okay, yeah, we have definitely lost Lee. That's all right. What's the story on Kavalan? They're a Taiwanese distillery that kind of broke onto the scene about 12-ish years ago. They keep getting absolutely crazy scores in the Whiskey Bible, in major international tastings, in major competitions. We initially were not carrying Kavalan. I think Lee's calling us back finally. Hooray. We initially didn't carry them because I brought them in when it very, very first broke. We were selling the Kavalan Solus for like $89.95. Solus now is $189.95. And when it first broke, nobody bought it, so I didn't carry on with it. It's only now that it's kind of gotten really, really big, and I've had a chance to be reconvinced on it that the whiskey quality is absolutely ridiculously good. So this was actually so good, it was the impetus to finally break the dam and make me put our international single malts in the same shelves as our Scotch whiskeys. So it, and let's all buy Kavalan to piss off Beijing. Good call. But no, this was finally the straw that broke the camel's back on me putting international single malts in with the rest of the single malts. So. And yes, Kevin, you definitely will be able to get 2 Clynelishes because I'm planning on buying 90 of them when they go on sale, if they go on sale. Lee, thank you for joining us again.
I had to bow out when you were talking about signatory. It just hurts too much.
Sorry.
Not at all, not at all. There was a technical time. I'm just kidding. Loves me some signatory. I bought an old Brook Laddie of theirs not long ago. I saw one dusty in another store. I'm like, oh, I remember this one. Snack that up.
It's funny what you see around every now and then.
Years. This one was an old peated Brook Laddie.
Ooh. No, like early days peated Brook Laddie?
Like Jim Beam era, yeah.
Holy shit, where the heck did you see that?
No, it was a signatory in that with one of those barrels. Yeah.
Oh, good lord.
Yeah, it was one of those real, like I knew it because I'd had it. I actually had it at the Edward Hour Distillery, and then saw it and snapped it up. It didn't last long.
No, they tend not to. All right, well, it is getting on 7:05, and I'm sure people have other things they'd like to do with their evening, and we're basically out of scotch, thanks to a very thirsty and hiccupy Aaron.
Oh, God.
And because we actually, hi Doug, we had to squeeze one more sample out of all the bottles at the last minute. So 2 pints of Talisker, maybe 2 ounces. Thank you also so much for joining us. See, Lee has some Talisker to drink. I have, well, I have a fly could stand up in that. Thank you also.
You like the Ardmore better.
I did, and I have exactly the same amount of Ardmore. But thank you very much, Lee. This was great. We will talk to you very shortly, actually. Probably not on camera, but we'll do something in the new year.
Really looking forward to it. I'm sure I'll chat with you before Christmas.
Sounds wonderful. Talk to you then.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Good night, Lee. And good night to all of you. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we will talk to you again soon. Good night.
Thanks, Aaron. Take care.
Well, I thought Lee was actually